Up, so if everyone could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag, to the republic, one nation, under God, for liberty, justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Fay, are you there? Mr. Fay? Does anybody know if Mr. Fay is out there?
I am
It looks
looking
like-
for him.
Looks
He
like
was.
all the call-in users are muted. So they can be unmuted.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, Mr. Fay, if you could open up the Housing Authority meeting, and then I'll explain the process at that point.
Mr. Chairman, before you do that, can I ask Selectman
yeah.
Priest to read
Absolutely.
the governor's virtual meeting language, please?
Absolutely. I forgot. Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank you.
Okay. So, excuse me. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this public hearing of the Town of Burlington Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. The public can listen and or view this meeting while in progress as broadcast on BCAT Government Cable Access Television, BCAT Government Coverage Facebook Live page, or by using the link provided in the agenda for our WebEx Cisco online meeting, or via phone at 408-418-9388. The meeting number is 713-678-190. The meeting password is 28. I assume this is case sensitive, so apologize. 28 lowercase t, capital M as in Mickey, capital Q as in quilt, capital A as in alpha, lowercase k as in kite, 4, capital B as in boy, 2. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by commenting on the BCAT Government Coverage Facebook Live page, the chat function on the WebEx virtual meeting, or via telephone at 781-270-1635. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. Okay, so at this point, Housing Authority Chairman, Mr. Fay, could you open up your meeting, and then I'll explain how this is going to work.
Yes, and opening up the meeting, we've done the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm just going to take the attendance. I'll call the name, and all they have to do is say present. Richard Howard. Present. Angela.
Present.
Bonnie Ferguson.
Present.
And Al Fay, Chairman, is present. And we'll follow the lead of the Board of Selectmen at this time. We're present there, and we'll go with the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. So at this point, what we're going to do is the process is going to be every selectman and every Housing Authority member has an opportunity to ask one question. You will be called on to ask your question. You can deny the question if you would like. The two applicants will answer each question. We'll start off in alphabetical order. Brian Curtin will be asked first, and then it will be asked second. At that point, we will flip-flop from one question from the Board of Selectmen and one question from Housing Authority, and it will go back and forth. We'll flip-flop through all the questioning. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. At the end of it all, we'll have a roll call vote. And if there is a tie, the tiebreaker will be the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. Okay? So at this point, We'll start off with the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Hogan,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to the two candidates. I suppose my question for both would be if you each can give us a Reader's Digest version of what you see as your responsibility towards the senior population on the Housing Authority.
Mr. Curtin.
Brian, you're on mute.
I'm on mute.
Yep.
Not anymore.
Pardon me?
You're okay now.
My responsibility as a housing board member is to work with the Board of Housing other members and as well as the Board of Selectmen to dedicate our time to try to obviously come up with some new ideas to expand the housing that we have. We have 105 affordable apartments now, and we have, 2 houses that we obviously, they pay taxes onto the town of Burlington, and 2 other Hallmark Gardens in another unit. And we have 93 Section vouchers, 93 Section 8 vouchers. But I really believe that, the town needs to accept the Community Preservation Act, which would create more income and give us, the town, more funds for new projects that we could generate. In Massachusetts alone, the conservation legislation has allowed 5,700 additional units to be built in various towns across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I feel that I am passionate about helping seniors, and I would work with the other members to create some new revenue sources to create more affordable housing for the town of Burlington.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin. Terry.
Hi.
How are you? You have
I'm
the
good,
same
thank
question. How are you?
Sure.
Could you
Sure.
like to hear the question again?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
First, I just want to thank you all for inviting me to the meeting tonight and for all the work that you and the Selectmen and the Housing Authority do. It's important work, and I'm really appreciative of everything you do, especially in the crisis that we're experiencing. I believe the role of the Housing Authority, as Brian mentioned, is to provide safe, decent, affordable housing to Burlington seniors and others of modest means, vulnerable populations within the town. I think that, well, first and foremost, I want to mention something that I don't know that we've all talked about. I've had an opportunity to meet some of the board members and some of the selectmen to give a little bit of my background, but I've worked for the last 10 years at Harvard University.
Terry?
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but at the end of it, we'll have a 2-minute segment to give background and speech, a little background. I think what you're about to do right now. So at the end of it all, we'll have you and Brian also give your resume part of it.
Sure.
They're just the questions right now, okay?
Sure. So I think
Great.
that the responsibility of the board to the town seniors is critical. Over the next 2 decades, as the baby boomers grow, the generation grows, the number of older adults in the US is going to significantly soar. We're going to go from about 56 million to 80 million. And I think that in order for Burlington to serve this population, it's going to be critical for the Housing Authority to grow. It's important that we find ways, exactly as Brian mentioned, to expand the supply that we have of affordable housing, and also that we get creative about ways to bring more people into the fold. Right now, there's some income limitations, things like that, that I think we need to think about other ways that we can make more accessible, affordable housing for not just our seniors, but for other vulnerable populations within the town currently and our future residents.
Thank you very much. Mr. Howard,
Yes.
you have any questions?
No, thank you.
No questions, okay. Mr. Tigas,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to say, after looking at both resumes and backgrounds, I kind of wish we had 2 openings on the Housing Authority, but unfortunately, we only have 1. But my question is to the candidates. Are you aware of any area in town that could possibly or potentially be used for senior housing?
that would be to you, Kerry.
Sure.
You'll answer
So
first.
my understanding in speaking with Anne Marie, the executive director of the Housing Authority, and some of the board members is that the Housing Authority does own some property within town that could be used for development. I'm particularly interested in how it can be used for mixed use and not just for seniors housing, but to sort of expand the supply of affordable housing for other populations within town. I don't know where that property is. The information was privileged when I inquired about it, but I'd be very interested in learning more about it and finding ways that we can take advantage of that and find ways to creatively and smartly grow the supply that we have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Curtin, same question.
My opinion is that I've actually looked into it in the last couple of years. I've had conversations with the Recreation Department, Kevin Sullivan, who's the chairman, and I think the old Nike site property would be a prime location to expand our housing units in the town of Burlington. We would have to work with the Recreation Board as the Selectmen and the Housing Authority, but Kevin seemed open to discussions. That's a large parcel of land, and with the town building a new DPW recreation facility, that property will no longer be needed by the recreation to maintain their vehicles. I think that's a prime site to look into if we got the revenue that we need to generate to create some more affordable housing units. That would be a great location. I think what Kerry was referring to is, I know that the Housing Authority owns a piece of property off close to the Lexington line. I think we could work with, the Nordblums of the world and Gutierrez's, and hopefully form some kind of partnership with business through the Selectmen and the Housing Authority to maybe obtain a piece of land that is, I think, would be susceptible to have some housing built, all right, that we could expand the units for the residents of town that make them affordable, obviously.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin.
Thank you both.
Ms. Bean, do you have any questions? And it will be asked of Brian first.
Hi there. Yes, I do. And thank you both, Brian and Carrie, for applying for this position. So, Mr. Curtin, do you have any prior experience with low-income housing or Section 8 housing?
You're on mute, Brian. There you go.
Okay. Angela, I don't have any direct experience with, obviously, low income and Section 8 housing. Obviously, I've been the treasurer collector for the town of Burlington for the last 43 years. I grew up here in town, been here for 65 years. I know the senior population well. I do have several friends that sit on other housing authority boards, as well as the current members of our board. I'm sure that I could come up to speed quickly on the process of how that is handled. I'll look to them for their experience and guidance and bring me up to speed. But I know Burlington well, and I'm sure that I could come up to speed pretty quickly.
Thank you very much, Brian. Ms. Donahue.
Yes, thanks for the question, Angela. Yeah, so as I've started to mention, I've worked for the last decade for a housing research center. So in that role, I've spent a great deal of time understanding Section 8 housing, and not just Section 8 housing, but broader housing issues, housing policy, and the research that my center does around homeownership, affordability, aging and housing, community development. I've basically had a front row seat to how federal programs like Section 8 can serve our most vulnerable families, the limitations of the program, how long the waiting lists are, how difficult it can be for voucher holders to find rental units once they're able to get a voucher. I spend my days and nights thinking about housing. My center regularly briefs the HUD Secretary in Washington, D.C. and HUD staff about what we see as improvements that need to be made to the housing policies in order to ensure that everyone has access to safe, affordable, decent housing. So yeah, I have a lot of experience in this area.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Runyon, I have a question, and Ms. Donahue will answer it first. Michael? Mike? Does anybody have Mike?
I know Mike was on earlier.
Yes.
I see him on.
I don't-
Why don't we go to the next name?
Mr. Priest?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, there he is. He's back.
So my question is around how you would encourage.
Thank you, Mr.
Mike, hold on.
Okay, thank you,
Hold on.
Mr. Chairman,
Hold-
and
Michael? Michael,
let me
hold on.
thank Kerry and Brian both for their interest in the vacancy we have at the Housing Authority.
Okay, Nick, hold on.
Yeah, Joe, you hear me?
Go ahead, Mike.
All right, let's give it a try. All right, drawing from the Commissioner's Handbook, member should concern him or her goals and provide the vision required to meet the needs of the community. So my question is, do you think that our current inventory meets the needs of Burlington, or do we have some work to do?
Kerry, that's to you.
I did.
Thanks for that, Mike. I think that we absolutely are not meeting the current needs of our community. I think that Burlington, like so many other towns around it and across the country, frankly, are struggling to meet the needs of both our seniors and other vulnerable populations. I think we have a lot of work to do. I think that long-term planning is something that's going to be critical. As I mentioned, the number of seniors in the US is going to absolutely explode over the next 2 decades. And I think we've had this level of property for a while, and it's going to be really important that we look ahead and be ready to serve the sort of tsunami of older adults that is coming at us.
Thank you very much. Mr. Curtin, question.
Yes, same response. We, in the town of Burlington now, we've got 6,798 registered seniors, which makes up 26% of our population. We definitely, with only 105 affordable apartments and the other 4 units that we have, we're not meeting the demands and the needs. And as we both all know, with the baby boom generation coming of age, which is part of my presentation, we're definitely not going to meet it. And we have to do some long-term planning, like Kerry says. And that's why I feel really, passionate about investing in the Community Preservation Act to generate more revenue for the town, so we can start to do the long-term planning to gain the necessary revenue we're going to need to build some more available affordable housing units in Burlington.
Thank you, Brian. At this point, Mrs. Ferguson, do you have any questions?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I do want to thank these two for their interest in this board. That's
Great.
it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Priest, go back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So obviously, thank you to both candidates for applying and being a part of the process. It's always good to have people, interested in being involved in our community. And with a community as vastly growing and changing as ours is, finding good, smart people is always a little bit tricky. My question goes to the idea of communication and outreach. How would you encourage staff to, provide outreach? How would you open up the realm of communication to ensure that folks are being not only made aware of the housing available here in Burlington, but also, educating them around, what, the Housing Authority does and, how they can utilize the services.
Am I first, Joe, or?
Yes, sir.
What I would like to do, at least my vision is to work with Marge McDonald from that works well with our senior population here in town. I think that we need to work and with the seniors that are involved now in our senior center and educate them. A lot of them go up there and, may own their own house right now, but there may come a time when income-wise they can't afford them. I think we have to work on communicating and getting, both emails and other addresses of the people that are in that age bracket. And, obviously develop a brochure that can be sent out to them and keep them abreast of what the changes are that are going in the town. I think we have to communicate with them and get a list of people that, are in that age category so that when we work with the town clerk, so that we can, readily communicate with them and keep them apprised of any new opportunities that are going to be affordable for them in the future.
Thank you, Brian. Ms. Donahue, same.
Sure. So I think housing is something that's so personal that I think it's really important that both the staff and the board of the Housing Authority have a face-to-face relationship with their residents. I think that it's important that the staff and the board not only be accessible and available to residents, but actively outreach to them. I think social isolation is something that's a serious problem right now and something that the board has a responsibility to ensure they're addressing. And one of the things that I've noticed, for instance, is that the Housing Authority as it stands right now is not using technology to its greatest potential. I think the website I noticed was just finally updated, brought kind of into the 21st century, but it still contains just the barest of bare bones information. It could be used in so many other ways as a resource, as an online gathering place. I think that the authority and the town both needed to be just thinking bigger about this issue and thinking creatively about ways that they can do outreach to the residents and through the senior center certainly, but just bigger than that. I think we have to think about using technology to its potential, but also the importance of face-to-face connections that need to be made.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Fay, do you have any questions?
None at this time, Brian. I applaud the two candidates. They've done a good job with this, but I don't have any questions at this particular time.
Okay, thank you very much. From the Selectmen's Board, we'll go with your profiles. I want you to both read them off, and I'm going to start with you, Carrie Donahue. That would be great if you could read a 2-minute.
Sure. So as I alluded to, back up a little bit. So my husband and I bought our house in Burlington in 2013. When we moved here, I was, sorry?
Nope.
When we moved here, I was working.
Hold on, Carrie. Hold on. I'm going to mute everybody so that we can hear everybody's comments. And just please remember to unmute yourself when you wish to speak.
Okay, it looks like everyone's muted. So as I mentioned, when my husband and I bought our house in Burlington in 2013, I was working full-time at Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies. I was going to school part-time at Harvard as well, getting my master's degree in business management, and our son was a toddler. I was stretched pretty thin, but both housing and serving my community are two things I'm very passionate about. And I knew that when I finished my master's, I wanted to find a way to use my skills, my expertise, my knowledge of housing, and my business management skills to give back to Burlington. I graduated last year. My son's older now. He's entering 5th grade this fall at Francis Wyman. And I feel like bringing my expertise and passion for housing to this board is an ideal way for me to serve the community that's been so good to me and my family. My husband likes to tell the story. A couple of years ago, I was doing a Habitat for Humanity build in Dorchester, building an affordable property for a family there. And at the very first project of the day, I was using this really big hammer drill. I turned it on, it spun out of my hand, and it hurt like nothing I'd ever experienced. But I put some ice on it and I kept working. So I worked all day building this house, and it wasn't until I went to the hospital afterward that I discovered my hand was broken in 2 places. And I spent the next 5 months in a cast. But my husband says this is the best example of how important housing is to me, that I will work all day with a broken hand to make sure that a family has access to affordable housing. So I want to bring this passion that I have for this subject to the town that, as I said, has just been really good to me and my family.
Thank you, Carrie. Brian?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? I
Yes,
want to
sir.
thank the Burlington Housing Authority and the Board of Selectmen for this opportunity to interview for this appointment on the Housing Authority as a board member. Most of you board members know me. I won't go over my resume. I've been a resident, like I say, of 65 years to the town. I'm retiring as the treasurer collector of the town after 43 years. I've gained a unique experience and background to prepare me to continue my career as a member of the Burlington Housing Authority. Having been a public servant, I'm going to have the time now, as I'm going to be retired as the treasurer collector. I believe I got the financial background and experience and the personal knowledge of the seniors in Burlington. I've had, as Kerry says, a great passion to help senior populations. I mentioned the fact that there's 6,798 registered seniors in the town, which makes up 20% of our population. That's going to double in the next 5 to 10 years because of the baby boomers generation coming of age. I feel I can work well with the current housing board and the Board of Selectmen to develop new ideas and explore a new strategy to increase the available affordable housing units in Burlington. Town meeting has a warrant article in June on accepting the Community Preservation Act. I hear it may be postponed until September's town meeting, but as I've indicated in the questions that were asked tonight, I think this will give us the more funds that we need for new projects. As I said, the state has already built 5,700 affordable units in other communities with the revenue obtained from the Preservation Act. I've been involved in a small way over the past 20 years by organizing and taking part in the Christmas Mass and Christmas Carol sing-along for the seniors at the Burlington Housing Authority, which is sponsored by my St. Margaret's Parish. I've gotten to know many of the current residents, and I feel passionate about helping to bring new activities and programs to help them to continue to lead productive and comfortable lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So before we go to a vote, I'd like to, is this echoing or is someone doing something in the background? Okay. So like I said, before we go to a vote, I want to thank both candidates. I got the resumes right here in front of me. I have them on a computer. They're both fantastic. Someone said earlier, I wish we had 2 spots for 2 people. But apparently we don't. I can't. It's a very tough decision. Both very, very good candidates for this position right now. So at this point, what I'd like to do is, I have a question. Betty, would you like a roll call vote from myself for the Board of Selectmen, and I will do the Housing Authority? Or do you want the Housing Authority Chairman to do his roll call vote and go, or do you want me to do both?
What I would like you to do, Mr. Chairman, is alternate between the selectmen and the Burlington Housing Authority on who
Okay.
they would like to select.
Okay, so I'll do the whole vote and then I'll go back and forth for each person, okay?
Right, and then I will read each vote back to you as we do it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Betty. Before we go another step, Mr. Sagarino, any further thoughts or questions or direction for me?
I don't have anything further, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sagarino. Okay, we'll start off with a roll call vote. We'll start off with Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my only message before I vote to both of the candidates is over the next couple of years, there's going to be several housing authority seats up for re-election, including this one. If both candidates are serious as they seem tonight, then they may want to consider that option in the future. But tonight, my vote goes to Brian Curtin.
Thank you.
Bob Hogan. That's Bob Hogan for Brian Curtin.
Mr. Howard. Mr. Howard?
All the calling users are muted, and I don't know how they unmute themselves if they're on a telephone.
I will do it.
Thank you, Betty.
Can you hear me, Joe?
I got you now. Yes, I do.
Okay, my vote goes for Brian Curtin.
Okay,
Dick
thank you very
Howard
much.
goes for Brian Curtin.
Mr. Tigas,
Brian Curtin.
Jim Tigas, Brian Curtin.
Angela,
Carrie Donahue.
Angela, Kerry Donahue.
okay, that's done. Mr. Runyon, Mike? Here we go. I apologize for the language before he says anything. Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I vote for Mr. Curtin?
Michael Runyon, Brian Curtin.
Okay. Mrs. Ferguson,
Yes, Ronnie Ferguson, I'm voting for Brian Curtin.
Mrs. Ferguson, Brian Curtin.
Mr. Priest,
Kerry Donahue.
Nick Priest, we have Kerry Donahue.
and Mr. Fay.
My vote goes to Brian Curtin.
Al Fay, Brian Curtin, bringing our tally 6 for Brian Curtin, 2 for Kerry Donahue. Thank you both.
I'd like to thank both candidates very much. It was not a tie, so I didn't have to break the tiebreaker. That's the only reason why I didn't vote. And it's the only reason why I would have voted at this point under the rules that was guidelined by. So, Kerry, thank you so much for the application. And like Mr. Hogan said, there are a lot of seats coming up at this point. So, all I can say is thank you. Great resume.
Thanks,
Brian,
Joe.
congratulations.
I think everyone knows that this is something that's very important to me, and I'll definitely be involved in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Okay, Mr. Sagarino, we set a date, we set a date on this now, or do we do that later, or what do we do with this?
I believe Mr. Fay will speak to that. I believe he mentioned July 1st. Is that correct, Mr. Fay?
Well, due to the circumstances that we're working under right now, I don't know about the June meeting and so forth. But I would say that July 1st, I was going to leave that up to the Board of Selectmen, as they're setting their dates and all that stuff, so we can see how that works out.
Thank you. July 1st is fine.
So could I get a motion from a board member on the start time for this? Would be July 1st?
Mr. Chairman, if that, I'll make that motion.
Can I have a
I'll second.
second? Motion by
second
Jimmy,
that.
second by
Ronnie
Bob?
Ferguson.
Bonnie, okay. Betty, you need another roll call vote on this also, right?
Yes, sir. I would
Yeah.
like a roll call for each of the members from both the Board of Selectmen and the Housing Authority.
Okay, we're gonna do just like we did last time. We're gonna go back and forth, Betty, just so we're all in agreement. The
That's
motion
fine.
was made and seconded. Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes,
Mr. Tigas,
Yes,
Angela, Ms. Bean,
Yes.
Mr. Runyon. Here's Mike again. Mike, you have a vote for that?
Come over here.
Yes.
There we go. We got it. Mrs. Ferguson,
Yes,
yes. Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Fay?
Yes.
Mr. Morandi? Yes. Did you get all that, Betty?
Yes, I did, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you.
That would be 9-0.
Yep, okay. So I'd like to thank the Housing Authority for being a part of this. It was a huge help, whether it was by phone or by our new internet service we have now, which is great. And we're gonna move right along to our next application here, number 392. Mr. Sagarino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight we have some general obligation bonds for the board to approve. In conjunction with this issuance, and our credit rating of AAA affirmed by Standard & Poor's. This is great news for us, given the economic uncertainty caused by the pandemic. I have provided you each with that report, and I recommend that you read it when you have a chance. Bonds here for your approval tonight represent the first phase of the DPW facility project, 16.5 million, and also a refinancing of existing bonds to take advantage of historically low interest rates. And that will save the town over $825,000 over about the next 25 years or so. At this point now, I'll turn it over to our treasurer, Brian Curtin, for the details. This is Brian's last of many bond issuances to you tonight, and it looks like you have some big numbers to report to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Sagarino. Board members, first want to thank you very much for your confidence in me, appointing me on the Housing Authority. I have to keep myself busy after I retire here after June 30th, so I appreciate your confidence in me. I was talking with Paul earlier today, and John Denizio and Paul and I worked very hard on bringing this bond issue and refinancing to market. Paul did a fabulous job when we were on our conference call with Standard & Poor's, outlining the financial status of the town of Burlington, how well we're doing here compared to a lot of communities, especially in light of what's going on with this pandemic. Really have to congratulate the financial team here. We've really done a great job, and we have nothing but good news to report tonight to the Board of Selectmen, which makes me so proud of this town. This being my last bond issue, but going out with a bang, because we obtained 7 bids on the $20,910,000 bond, 30-year bonds, and the average interest rate is 2.21%, lowest in history that the town's ever financed a project of this magnitude. The circumstances being, obviously, the bond market right now, there aren't a lot of issues out there. We hit the market perfectly. And it would just, because we're a AAA rated community, as Paul says, we just hit the community beautiful. 2.23% is basically the total interest that we got. The winner was, which I put in my memo to you people, Raymond James and Associates, Inc., were the winning bidders on the bonds. We also, as Paul mentioned, we did a refinancing sale of 3 previous bond issues that the town of Burlington had that were outstanding, and we are able to receive a net interest rate of 1.69% and an annual savings of $826,399. As Paul said, the life of these bonds now, the average life, because of the refinancing, has been reduced to 7 years. So we'll be saving quite a bit of money over the course of those remaining years on those bond issues. But great news for the town of Burlington. I'm very happy to report, and I think Paul and I and John answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin. I have a lot I'm going to say, but let everyone else go first. So, Nick, any comments?
Sorry,
Mr. Priest?
I'll just say no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian and John, again, thank you for looking out for the town and saving us money again. But Brian, I don't know if you can answer this, but in your 43-year career, any idea how much you saved the town over the years?
I don't know totally, but I'll tell you, as I've said before in these meetings, it's no I in team. We've just been blessed. Burlington has with very, great financial teams, from town accountant Pat Mullen, the beginning of my tenure here, to, a couple of others in between, and then Paul Sagarino for the last number of years. And now Paul's our town administrator. We've been so blessed to have, qualified people in these positions. In the town, as we know, Burlington is Burlington. We are in a great location. We've got, a business that supports us greatly during the tax rate. We got a great tax levy. Even with this pandemic, they're paying their taxes. We've collected over 90% of our tax bills now. We've got till June 1st to finalize everything. So we're doing really great. But this particular bond issue, the rates were never better in my career in 44 years. I've never seen rates this low. So we hit this perfectly. Sad to say, with the times the way they are, and economically, we're going to be confronted with a lot of issues going forward, as we all know. Don't even want to discuss that. I'm kind of glad I'm retiring at this point in time, to be honest. Going out on a high note, like I said, it's going to be very challenging. But you guys have picked a great person to replace me, Gary Giannino, who was very qualified to step in and fill my shoes. So I think we have a bright future ahead. So, thank you, Jim, for that.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you for the comment. Brian, thank you for your 44 years of service to the town. And it's only been 2 weeks, but yes, it is better on this side.
Okay, Jim. Thanks, Jimmy. Mr. Runyon.
No questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hogan. You're muted, Bob. There you go.
I know, thank you. No, I have no questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Brian, all I can say is thank you. What a way to go out, huh? Huge money saving us. At some point, if you could sit down, you might have some time later on to figure out how much money you actually did save the town over the 112 years you've been working here. It's been wonderful. At this point, I need a motion in a second.
I'll make the motion that I just want to make sure how we word this. Betty, any insight, or Joe, how we should word that?
Mr. Sagarino?
Mr. Chairman, I would just vote to accept the bonds as presented by Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion, we accept the bonds as presented by Brian, Mr. Curtin.
Motion made, second by, won't be Mike, I can't hear him.
Nick did.
Nick did?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right, we need a roll call vote on this, please. Mr. Hogan? Mr. Hogan, did you vote?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yes, yes.
Mr. Runyon? He was all happy about him. I'm assuming it's a yes.
Yes.
There you go. Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Morandi? Yes. There you go, Betty. You have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have it.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along. Mr.
Thank you.
Sagarino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item up is in conjunction with the governor's state of emergency and is intended to provide the town with flexibility to expend funds to address the COVID pandemic. John Denizio is here to present the details of this action to the board. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Sagarino. So for this item in your packet, you received a memo and a copy of a bulletin from the Department of Revenue's Division of Local Services. So in there, it just talks about, given the governor's declaration of a state of emergency, there was some legislation passed that temporarily relaxes the limitations of Mass General Law 4431, which allows cities and towns to incur liabilities in excess of their appropriation. The spending for these excess appropriations has to be related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and they require prior approval from the commissioner before paying any of those. So this is really just a precautionary measure, because at this point, we don't anticipate needing to spend beyond our budget. But we do think it's prudent to take this vote just in case something should happen. These expenditures would cover things like overtime pay, cleaning and sanitization costs, maintenance and modifications made to ensure the health and safety of employees and the public, and the purchase of things like PPE or supplies. So the recommendation is that we ask for authorization to spend up to $100,000 beyond our budget. And again, we don't anticipate needing to use this. It really is just a precautionary measure. The memo from the guideline from the commissioner from the DSL outlined that this vote is necessary before you pay any bills, and it highlighted what bills you can pay, things like that. So I hope you got a chance to read it. And I included in my memo just a recommended motion for you, if you'd like.
Thank you, John. It was very interesting reading over the weekend. Thank you. We'll start with questions. Mike?
No questions.
Bob?
No questions.
Nick? I can't
No
hear him.
questions.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
No questions.
Joe, no questions. So at this point, I'll need a motion on this to pass this through. Mr. Sagarino, would you like to comment on this or anything at all?
This is a unique vote, but it's very similar to what the board has to do for snow and ice. When we have snow and ice emergencies and Mr. Sanchez comes in and asks for permission to expend for the emergency. So it's very similar, and it's put into place by the state to allow us to respond to COVID.
Thank you, Paul. So we'll go on a roll call vote. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon? Mr. Runyon? Can anybody hear him? Mr. Runyon?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
should we read the suggested motion as stated by Mr. Denizio?
Would you like to?
Sure, give me 1 second, I will.
Yeah.
Mike, do you want me to read the motion,
No,
Mr. Chairman?
I have it here. You ready?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I make a motion that the Board of Selectmen request approval from the Director of Accounts of the Division of Local Services allowing for emergency expenditures in excess
Yes.
of appropriations up to 100,000.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. Now I'm lost. Where was I?
Need a second.
Bob seconded. Okay, we'll start over again. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon? Here we go. Get ready for a word. It's coming. Okay, thank you, Betty. Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda, yes. So all in favor, Betty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have it.
Thank you. Oh, this has been the longest one ever, huh, guys? We're gonna go to 394 now. That would be Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up, we have a couple of alcohol hearings that we're going to ask the board to continue. Both of the proponents sent in sort of an update, and as you might imagine, there hasn't been a lot of activity in trying to activate these licenses due to the current situation. So there is no update, and we would recommend that the board continue item number 394, Del Frisco's, to Betty. The date and time, please.
Be going to June 22 at 6:30.
Do I have a motion on that?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Bob, second by
I'll second.
someone I can hear. Nick?
Yeah.
Thank you. We need a roll call vote. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Jimmy?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon? Anybody hears him, weigh in. Mike? Mike, one more time. Anybody hear him?
No, sir.
Betty, did you hear him? No?
No, sir.
Mr. Runyon? Betty, can we just abstain from that one?
Yes, yes, sir.
Mr. Priest, did you vote yes, right?
Yes,
Did I
sir.
ask you yet? Okay, Mr. Miranda, yes. So Betty, we're gonna go with 4-0-1,
Thank you,
I
Mr.
guess.
Chairman.
Okay, sorry, Mike, you're out. Mr. Sagarino, 395.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is another continued public hearing for the liquor license for Burlington Beer Works. Same situation, obviously, the owners of the license are having a very difficult time. They were having a difficult time before, but even more so with the current situation, not a lot of activity happening in this area. So we would like to ask the board to continue this public hearing to a date and time, which Betty has.
Thank you, sir. I do. It's for June 22, and this is for Slazer Brothers Brewing Company doing business as Burlington Beer Works to June 22 at 6:35.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Bob,
Okay.
second by Nick. Fantastic. Any gentlemen, any comments? Oh, we're just gonna, except for the continue from 3/11/19 and 7/19 and so on. You can read it. So we'll need a vote on this. Roll call vote again. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mike? You have a vote, Mike? Okay. Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Morandi? Yes. Betty, we're gonna do the same thing, okay?
Thank you, sir. I have it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Selectman Runyon messaged in. Yes, he's having a little issue with the connection.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
396.
You see that?
We've got it, Mike. Thank you.
Public hearing, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a public hearing, so I would like to ask Selectman Priest to keep an eye on the Facebook Live chat, and we also have the ability for residents to call in to a phone line here and ask a question or make a comment. That number is 781-270-1635. Anybody who is in our WebEx live meeting here tonight, please feel free to use the chat function to ask a question or raise your hand to be recognized, whatever you wish to do on that. But this meeting notice was already read into the record at the last meeting, so we don't have to ask Mr. Priest to read that tonight. But this is to approve the board's alcohol policy. And there's only been one slight change to it as relates to the AMC Theater. And I'll ask Betty to elaborate on that for the board, just as a reminder. Then we can, if we could, Mr. Chairman, if you could ask for public comment. And then we can discuss it and then, close the public hearing and ask for a vote.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Through the chairman, I'm just going to talk about how AMC came before the board on October 7, 2019, asking if the gentleman or the person who does patrolling for the alcohol sales could have additional duties. The board allowed them a 90-day period to try it out and see if it worked. They came back in December, and with all their numbers, the board was satisfied that the policy could be modified. Since we had to have a public hearing to do this, we're doing that now, and that's the only item being changed in the alcohol beverage policy at this time. Would you like me to read in the change? I can read in the change if you like.
Please, yes, Betty.
Okay, it's condition number 4, last sentence. The previous sentence said, this staff member shall not have any other duties assigned to them. We're going to add on to the end of that sentence, until and unless any and all duties as they relate to patrolling all areas of the theater are complete in order to ensure that all applicable liquor laws are met, period. That is the end of the change. And then on number 6, we're just correcting theater, the spelling. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Betty. So at this point, we'll go with when we open the public hearing first, you want questions from us first?
The public hearing was open last time, Mr. Chairman, so I think what we could do is just ask if there's any comment from the public. I know that there is a couple of folks here in the meeting with us, and again, I don't know what's coming up on Facebook Live, Selectman Priest. And again, we also have the phone line is open, 781-270-1635, and either Betty or I can answer that phone call with either a question or a comment. So if we just, I guess, give a couple minutes, sir, just to see if any residents want to chime in on this change.
Okay, great. So at this point, if there's a resident out there that would like to speak on this, please recognize yourself to the board and ask the question. Mr. Priest, is there anybody on Facebook that has a question for us?
I don't see any, excuse me, Mr. Priest, but I don't see any questions as it relates to alcohol.
Okay. We'll give it another couple seconds, and if no one has a question, we'll move right along at this point. Okay, at this point, I'll need a motion to close the public hearing. Is that right, Paul?
Yes, sir.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
So moved by Mr. Tiggs, second. I think that was Nick. And we'll need a roll call vote. Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Runyon,
Mr. Chairman, he commented on agenda item 396 as yes.
thank you. Mr. Tigges,
Yes.
Mr. Priest,
Yes.
Ms. Morandi, yes. So 500, Betty.
Thank
Mr.
you, sir.
Chairman.
I have it.
Can I just ask a question? I'm not sure if Selectman Runyon's allowed to vote that way, so Is it possible, just a suggestion to the board, to mark that as a 401? Again, I'm not sure what the legalities are around voting through the chat as opposed to verbally, and where this is our alcohol policy, I'd rather err on the side of safety. I'm
I
sure
agree.
Mike won't mind, and we are aware that he supported the change. It says it right here on the chat, but I'm just not sure if that counts as a legal way for a board member to vote on something.
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Fine.
So Betty, did you get this? So it'll be 401, Betty.
Thank you, sir. I have it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul. So at this point, Paul, move to 397.
397, Mr. Chairman, we have John Denizio here, as well as our Economic Development Director, Melissa Tintakis. Why don't we start with John, and then Melissa can update the board on conversations that she's had with the Economic Development Subcommittee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there are 3 articles that still require a vote from the board. We talked about it last meeting. The 3 articles left are Article 6, which is just voting the total of the operating budget that has now been voted by Ways and Means, so it's ready for a vote here. And then the 2 economic development articles, which is Article 24, which would like Melissa to do some brief comments about, because that's probably going to be postponed. And then Article 25, I'd like to have Melissa present that. So if you don't mind, we could maybe vote on Article 6 first, which is the operating budget total, which is total raise and appropriate for this year's operating budget, which is $148,317,413. This total has been voted by the Ways and Means Committee is the total of all the different budgets that they've voted.
I asked John to repeat that. It all broke up and I couldn't get it.
Sure. 148,317,413.
Thank you,
So
John.
that's 148,317,413.
Okay.
Everybody all set with the number? Is Melissa here with us tonight?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, are you going to vote on the articles separately?
Would that be best, Mr. Sagarino, separately? Each one individually?
Well, I'll make the motion, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion that we approve the operating budget for the town at $148,317,413.
Sorry, I do have a question before, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we can approve this for the sake of discussion. So if we get a second, then you can do that.
I'll second it then.
Now we need a roll call vote.
Nick needs to talk.
Go ahead, Nick.
Mr. Chairman, I think
Sorry,
Nick has a question.
Just a quick question, sorry. John, what was I haven't had a chance to watch it. What was Ways and Means vote on this?
Hang on, Nick, let me see if I have it. I'm not sure if they actually vote Article 6 yet. I don't have what their vote was, but I'm sorry, I don't have their vote.
Nick,
Okay, no
they
worries.
vote
Thank you.
They vote each budget individually, and that is the sum total of all the budgets that they've approved for the operating budget. That makes sense. They vote them all individually by department, by line item, and that is the sum total that amounts to the budget article in the warrant.
Thank you.
All in favor?
We need to have a vote on this now. Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Runyon,
think he left the meeting.
Mr. Tiggs,
Yes,
Mr. Priest,
Yes.
Mr. Morandi, yes. You get that, Betty?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Oh, hi, Melissa, you're on.
Hi there.
Mis-
Can you all hear me okay?
At the moment,
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'd just like to bring kind of back to the board the warrant article number 24, which is the visioning conceptual site plan for the Burlington Mall. And then we'll talk next about Article 25. Regarding Article 24, we met with the Economic Development Subcommittee, which includes, Nick Priest and Mike Runyon, Selectman Runyon. And after kind of discussing this a couple of times, we had a couple meetings, we had revised the request. So originally it was for $65,000. What we did was review it and eliminated some technical consulting pieces to it. And it will be, currently the visioning would cost $35,000. However, that said, the Economic Development Subcommittee would like to have further discussions about how this would work and reconcile and essentially be in partnership with the property owners going forward. And so we think that we could kind of bring this back in September. So ultimately, this one would be postponed during this time for this town meeting.
Okay, so you're saying that the 35K would be postponed, is that what you're telling us?
That we work
That it had
together
changed,
to
yep.
reduce it, but even then, we want to kind of look at it further and give the chance for the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board to talk on it further regarding its visioning and bring it back for September.
Oh, great, thank you very much. Mr. Sagarino, any comments?
No additional comments, Mr. Chairman. I know that this is a very important initiative, and we just wanted to give it the proper time for Melissa to explore first with the subcommittee and then to spend some time with the full board, just so everybody understands the concept of what we're trying to do with it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So I got lost for a second. Where are we here? I got too many papers in front of me.
Mr. Chairman, we're looking for a vote to postpone, sir.
Okay,
so
so I
moved.
need a motion, the second to postpone this.
I'll make that motion. We postpone till September.
Motion by Jimmy, second by. Do I hear anybody? Nick?
Second by Nick, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're gonna go on a roll call vote again. Mr. Hogan,
I didn't hear.
it's a motion to postpone. Are you in favor or against?
I second it.
We did that. We're getting ready for a vote now, Bob. So the motion's been made and seconded.
I'm not hearing
and I'm
anything
looking for
here.
a vote. Okay, that's two. We're gonna skip Bob. Mike, are you out there at all?
Yes,
Okay, I
my
can
vote
hear
is
you.
yes to postpone.
Jim?
Thank you, Bob.
Yes,
Jim's a yes. Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Morandi's a yes. So Betty, we're gonna go with the 401 again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sagarino?
Mr. Chairman, we have one more article from Melissa that she wishes to move forward with, and she has the support of the Economic Development Subcommittee. So we're going to let her give you guys a little bit of an overview of that one, and you guys can take your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa?
Yep. The next one would be warrant article number 25, and the funding is for a request for the Economic Development Strategic Plan for Burlington. And this lays out the plan going forward for the next 3 to 5 years in terms of policy and target industries, incentives, and other programs and policies that we should be looking at as a town going forward. So kind of recognizing that right now we're in a really, challenging kind of space with, exploring reopening with the pandemic. We don't want to lose sight of our long-term vision to grow what we have and sustain what we have. As everyone knows here, 51% of our tax revenue comes from commercial and industrial properties. And we want to make sure that we have that in, that we're well positioned to sustain that, if not grow that in a reasonable and smart manner. So the idea is this lays out more of a detailed roadmap for that. It reaffirms maybe our industries that we want to target, in particular, that's life sciences, explores a couple of their new industries that we're seeing a pattern of, as we mentioned at one of the last Board of Selectmen meetings, additive manufacturing and 3D printing. And we want to look at how, our strong retail and restaurant industries will come back in its next iteration, which I'm very confident they will be, but we want to make sure we're positioning ourselves for that. So with that, this effort helps to fund and kind of frame that out, and it provides a roadmap for all of us, elected officials, private property owners, and educators, so we can kind of work to kind of in the same direction.
Thank you, Melissa. Let's go with questions. Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have no questions, but as part of the subcommittee, took part alongside Selectman Runyon to have this conversation with Melissa around the importance of providing that, seed funding to her role into this department as we look forward. And I think, it's really important that, I think we're all thinking about, but, I'll say it is, even though this is the current circumstances that we are in are interesting and difficult, planning now for when, we'll have that opportunity to, bounce back and, be part of things again, I think is crucial. Let's set ourselves up for success while we have the time. So Mike and I were both in favor of this.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. Thank you. Jimmy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Melissa, I imagine you're going to play a role in this phased reopening. So I was just wondering if you could just kind of keep us in the loop as to how things progress locally. We see, what's happening nationally and locally, statewide. But if you could just keep us updated as how our rollout, our phases are going, I'd really appreciate it.
Separate from this request.
Yeah, separate from this request, this is just a general conversation and let us know how things are going in town.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I'm looking forward to we had a meeting with Paul, Kristen, Rick, as well as the chairman of the planning board. And we had, a good discussion in terms of looking at kind of some overarching policies and how that affects some of the small businesses as they reopen. So I'm happy to give that report on either a regular basis or when, you see fit.
Okay, thank you. I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan.
This time, but I am going to say that I'm going to abstain only because I just haven't been able to hear enough with all the things breaking up. So it's no reflection on Melissa, but I just I didn't get enough information tonight to be able to say yes or no.
Okay. Mr. Runyon, we're gonna give you a shot. And nothing. Okay, so I'll need a motion in a second at this point. To,
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we approve Article 25 as written.
Second,
motion- Second by Jimmy. Mr. Hogan abstaining.
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay, Mr. Runyon? You said he left the meeting, right? So he abstains or a no zero vote. Jim?
yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yeah.
Huh, it's up to me. Mr. Morandi? Yes. There you go. You got it, Betty? 3-0-0, whatever you want to write down.
3-0-1, one abstention.
All right, thank you, Betty. Melissa, thank you so much for your time and effort on this. It's got to be a long process, but that's why we hired you. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention on this evening. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything further to add on the warrant articles. I think that wraps up that agenda item, and I think we're ready to move on to the next one, which is minutes.
Okay, would somebody like to approve the minutes on 398?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Nick, second by,
Second,
that was Jim, second by Jim. We need a roll call vote on this. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mike's out. Mr. Tigas?
yes.
Thank you. Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda, yes. Thank you, Betty. I know you have it. Subcommittee reports. We'll start out with Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other thing that I bring before the board tonight is a consideration from the Sculpture Park Committee. They are working hard amidst the pandemic to ensure that things progress after we had voted to approve the Sculpture Park. So two things. One, they are currently, I believe, and I apologize, I missed the last the Sculpture Park meeting, but they are working with the high school students to get and obtain a logo. And so they're working on that front. And then they had a question/request of us, which was they're trying to decide, and they feel it would be better if they had the 6 sculptures installed one at a time, one per month moving forward, to reduce the amount of people who may be congregating around the sculptures at any given time. Hopefully, starting with the dog. I figure maybe we could talk about this in old new business, or we could talk about it now. But their thinking is that they can help spread it out, or the congregation of people out, by doing them one at a time, and also extend the enthusiasm for the Sculpture Park as it's kind of unveiled over the course of the summer. And so I kind of put it to the board for thought.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hogan, any thoughts on this?
On this item? Or on
Yes.
the report? Okay, no, I have nothing on the.
No, not on a report. On Nick was looking for a little bit of insight on putting up the dog first and some other things as time progressed because of what's going on. I just didn't know if you had a comment about it, or he asked if we could talk about it a little bit to see how the board felt. There's no vote here to be taken. There's nothing going on.
Oh, I would support the idea, but not voting for it tonight. I would support it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tiggs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Priest, is there a reason why they chose once a month? Or the reason why is if we do 6, it's going to be into the winter. Whereas if they do them, and this is just a suggestion, once every 2 weeks, like once every other week, then at least the weather will be nice for them to have some sort of event when they unveil them, if we're allowed to do that at this time.
Yeah, I think that they were just trying to create buffer between the two. I'm sure they'd be fine with, every couple of weeks. I was actually of the mindset that, the number of people that would be around for the installs themselves, we can block out over the course of, several days or a week, 2 weeks, and then, put out a notice that just, asks people to maintain social distancing while visiting the sculpture park, and that we don't necessarily need to do an unveil over the course of several months. But Jim, that's a fair point. I think every 2 weeks would be fine if they were amenable to it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but I didn't hear what Selectman Hogan said. He was breaking up on my end.
Okay, thank you. Listen, my quick comment on this, I agree with Mr. Tigas. I think every couple of weeks would be good, but it's not up for vote. So if you want to give me a text during the next week, we'll throw it on the next meeting agenda, and then we can, if we need to vote on it at that point, we can to get this thing off the ground. I think putting it out there right now would be a great inspirational point for some citizens to say, well, the town's still doing something, even though they don't see what we do all the time. Is that all you have?
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Jimmy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things from the fire department. Recently, both stations were decontaminated, and that was at the cost. The cost was absorbed by the Last Call Foundation, which is it's a group that was organized in memory of Boston firefighter Michael Kennedy. They picked up the cost for decontaminating both stations and the apparatus. The work was done by Red Line First Responder Gear Cleaning and Inspection out of Marlborough, Mass. And the Last Call Foundation, they're funding decontamination of fire stations throughout the Commonwealth as part of their mission. So on behalf of the chief, we'd like to thank the Last Call Foundation for their generous support. Also, the ambulance that was approved last May town meeting is anticipated to arrive by the end of June, so that should be online soon. And as a reminder, the fire department continues to provide uninterrupted service to the community during this difficult period. We would like to personally acknowledge the great work of their members as they respond to COVID-19 related calls for service, as well as numerous other calls for service. And as a reminder to our audience, please remember to cover your face when you're out in public, wash your hands, maintain social distancing, be vigilant of COVID-19 symptoms, and stay at home if you're feeling sick. And one more quick comment, and then I'm done. I'd like to thank Bob Athos, who's the owner of Culinary Creations. He provided breakfast for both the police and fire departments this past Friday as a donation and a thanks to the first responders for all they do in town. He's a small local catering company, and he just thought this was a good way to acknowledge the work that our first responders do every day. And that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Mr. Hogan.
No report at this time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, I'd like to let the board and the members of the public at home know that unfortunately, due to the situation, we'll not be having a live Memorial Day ceremony this year. As everybody is aware, I see you guys at the ceremony every year. The town has a long history of just providing a beautiful ceremony in honor of our fallen soldiers, and unfortunately, we won't be able to do that live this year. So spoke to Veterans Director Chris Hannafin, and he and Jen in his office are putting together a very thoughtful, very beautiful ceremony to be taped and played on BCAP. So I just, it's an unfortunate sign of the times, but we just can't as you all know, that event is extremely well attended, and there's no way that we would be able to possibly hold that under the current governor's orders. So it's going to be an on-TV ceremony, and I think it's going to be done beautifully and respectfully, as it always has been.
Thank you, Mr. Sagarino. Real quick, on my end, first I'd just like to thank everybody in town for what they've been doing. Fire, police, DPW workers, everybody. This office upstairs here has been incredible. This thing has been quite the epidemic, as the word is now used, over the last 8 weeks. The governor came on TV today. He's allowing a couple things to be open this week, a couple more things the next week. Thank God we're trying to go back to somewhat of a normalcy where people will actually be going to work. That doesn't mean that this is over. There's a lot of guidelines that have to be met in all these businesses. For those of you that are wearing masks, congratulations on wearing one. For those of you that aren't, just think of the others that could possibly be hurting by not wearing a mask. There's a million things I could say about it, but I'll leave it at that. And I just want to thank everybody involved for everything they've done. That's all I have at this point. I'll need a motion to close the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, before we do that, just real quick,
Yes, sir.
during the meeting via Facebook, one of the residents, Kathleen Fazio, had just asked a question if we had received an email of hers pertaining to her lawn. I just want to acknowledge the fact that we did receive that email, and I believe she's already been in contact with DPW, but just putting it out there that we'll probably follow back up with her, close the loop. She was also logged into the meeting at one point and then logged out.
So moved.
And then just, I don't know who Derek Campbell is, but if we need to observe citizens' time, just want to do that for you, sir.
Okay, what was Mrs. Fabio, what did she refresh my memory on what she sent?
Sorry, there was an email from early April pertaining to her lawn repair and the watering ban. And there was some conversation between her and DPW. There's a whole thread here, but I can re-forward, or Paul, I believe you might have it more readily available. But
okay, thank you. Yep, I remember that now. All right, thank you. I think that's been addressed at this point, I believe, right, Mr. Sagarino?
As far as I know, I think she's probably referring to the other email that she sent this morning. Nick, perhaps you haven't seen that.
I did not.
I know you saw it, Joel. You saw it, Jim. You got back to me on it. About the company.
That's right. Yes, I did. Okay. All right.
Paul, would
Is
you
there
mind
anything else?
forwarding that to me? I don't know that I have it.
I'll forward that to you, Nick. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anything else, gentlemen?
Negative.
There's only 3 of us left.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we, to adjourn.
Motion made by Jimmy, second by Mr. Priest. Mr. Hogan?
Yep.
Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest?
Yes.
Mr. Morandi? Yes. Motion made, seconded, voted on, adjourned. Good night. Thank you very much.
Right on.
Right.
Thank you. Good night.